Not only are there tons of alternate Thors that exist within the multiverse, I mean God Emperor Doom's battle world alone, but there are also just tons that exist even within Earth 616. That's the main continuity from the comics. Welcome back, Nerd Squad. It's me, Amanda. This is the top 10 alternate versions of Thor. Let me know in the comments if there are any alternates here that you have not heard of, and if you have any favorites of your own. Number 10. Ben Grimm. There are so many excellent alternate versions of Thor to highlight from the Thor core, but I decided to go with the version I don't believe I have ever talked about on this channel. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I have. We're talking about Benjamin Grimm, who's not just a member of the Thor core, Emperor God Doom's enforcers of justice and peace on Battleworld, but is also a member of the Fantastic Thors. That's right, this alternate version of the Fantastic Four all became Thors, although it's never established as to how this happened for them. I just think the idea of Ben Grimm becoming Thor is pretty cool. I mean, Ben is already a super strong character, so imagine combining him with the sheer godly power as well of Thor. The Thor core in general are also just insane. And friends, before we move on to our next spot on this list, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, why not consider clicking that subscribe button? It's good for us, it's good for you, it's good for everyone. Number 9. Adam Aziz. Like Jane Foster, Adam Aziz became Thor briefly when the hammer presented itself to him. However, he didn't last nearly as long as other mortals have in the role. Definitely not as long as Jane Foster. This is because the hammer presented itself to him when it was broken during Donny Cates' recent Thor run. It wasn't that Adam was worthy, it was that the hammer needed to be fixed. He asked Thor before returning Mjolnir to him if he could use it to fly once high up in the sky like he and the other heroes so often do. Thor gave him permission, and afterwards he returned the hammer, giving Thor some advice on how he might fix it, based on Adam's own experience. The good old IT crowd fix. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Number 8. Ben Parker. If you can believe it, in an alternate reality, there is actually a version of Benjamin Parker, Spider-Man's uncle, who became Thor. This version of Thor and Ben hails from the alternate reality of Earth 615 and makes his first and only appearance in Secret Wars 2, issue number 1. Secret Wars 2 is in TOO, by the way. Here we're introduced to Thor as a member of the Avengers, who are one of the superhero teams from a region of Battleworld known as number 615. Here, everyone is actually Ben Parker, so I think you can imagine the Avengers, I mean, they're all Ben. Number 7. Eric Masterson. Okay, so with Thor, there are a lot of other folks who have also had the mantle, but this isn't really the same as someone like, DC's Green Lantern. For that, there are many different Green Lanterns, and then there are alternates of those characters from other realities. For Thor, there's usually only one Thor at a time, which is why I'm letting myself count versions of the character like Eric Masterson who are from the main continuity. Eric for a time was Thor himself, but also existed as Thor in the Earth 616 reality. How was this possible? Well, Eric was just a mortal man, but after becoming involved in Thor's adventures, ended up bonded with the hero after he received a life-threatening injury. In order to save Eric's life, Thor pleaded with Odin to help. Odin helped by merging Thor and Eric together, with them each initially retaining their own separate personalities and forms, but simply sharing a body. Number 6. Thor Machine. Thor Machine was the editorial name given to this alternate. This version of Thor is one you might recognize as War Machine, aka Jim Rhodes, aka Rhodey, Tony Stark's good friend and ally. However, this isn't the Rhodes of Earth 616, the main continuity. This is the Rhodes of Earth 12311, home of Technopolis, and one of the alternate realities that was created when God Emperor Doom rebuilt the multiverse in his image, following the incursions destroying the multiverse we knew previous to Secret Wars, the 2015 Secret Wars, to be clear. Here, Rhodes was known as Grand Marshal Jim Rhodes, the Thor of this reality and an ally to the Baron of this domain, an alternate Tony Stark. Instead of him being an Asgardian god, this version of Thor actually gets his powers from his armor, which resembles the look of Thor's costume and armor. Number 5. Jane Foster. Jane is her own character, but was for a time also Thor. Currently in the comics, she's instead known as Valkyrie right now, but before that, she was granted the powers of Mjolnir after Thor was deemed unworthy and lost his ability to use it. The hammer called to Jane, and she answered the call, becoming Thor, known editorially as Mighty Thor. Eventually, Jane gave up the ability to become Thor in her final fight against Mangog. She sacrificed herself as transforming into Thor was actually killing her. Currently suffering from cancer, the transformation basically wiped clean any of the progress her chemotherapy treatments were making in fighting back against the disease. In the end, Jane bound Mangog in chains intended for Fenris that were attached to Mjolnir and hurled up the hammer into the sun. This destroyed the hammer and seemingly killed Jane, ending her time as the mysterious Lady Thor. Of course, Thor Odinson would not give up, and surprisingly, with Odin's help, was able to revive her, with her passing the mantle of Thor back to Odinson. Number 4. MCU. I mean, can I really do a list like this without talking about Chris Hemsworth's take on the character? I do not think that I can. While Thor Love and Thunder was not exactly the masterpiece we were all hoping it to be for the Thor and Marvel superhero franchise, you can't say that the character development we've seen for Thor has been amazing. By far, Thor has seen some of the most character development among the versions of the heroes we've come to know in the MCU. I would say Thor and Scarlet Witch oddly have seen some of the greatest developments throughout the more than decade we've been watching superhero films and television. Thor went from a reckless god who didn't really feel he belonged on Earth, nor really wanted to be there, to one of Midgard's greatest heroes, to an orphaned and relatively directionless Asgardian, to the hero of his people, to someone who himself went toe-to-toe with Gore in an attempt to protect not just his people, but all the gods of the universe. That's quite the journey, honestly. Also, he got a haircut, which for Thor, honestly, that's a pretty big deal. Number 3. Loki. A version of Loki who we initially knew as Kid Loki, but who has since become the main Loki in the comics, no longer a kid version of himself currently, was actually once Thor. He took up the mantle during the Marvel Axis event. Now, if you don't know of Axis, it was basically an event where the alignments of many major heroes and villains in the Marvel universe were flipped. For Thor, this meant he became a villain. For Loki, however, this meant he was free of the guilt of his past misdeeds and basically became a straight-up hero. It also meant he was deemed worthy to wield Mjolnir, which he did, himself becoming the hero Thor and fighting against his now evil brother Odinson. However, after the alignments of everyone were once more reversed, returning everyone, or almost everyone anyways, back to their old alignments, the guilt crept back in, making Loki feel unworthy and ending his brief time as the hero Thor. Number 2. Ultimate Thor. Ultimate Thor initially seemed to not be Thor at all, but just a human man named Thorleif Gorman, who was deemed delusional. However, in truth, he was actually Thor, and the delusions he would later suffer would actually reveal themselves to, in fact, be true memories. Claiming to be the Norse god of thunder at first led to him being institutionalized, but later these delusions were in fact confirmed to be his true memories by Dr. Donald Blake, whom Thor actually recognized as the reincarnation of his half-brother Balder. Thor was simply remembering after being exiled for years to Midgard and made to forget. Initially, it was the suit that Thor wore, which was given to him by the Dome, that gave him his powers. But as his memories came back, the power within him was unlocked and returned to him ultimately by Odin so that he might use it to defeat Loki. And he reclaimed his actual powers, not needing the suit to necessarily channel them. Though one of the interesting things is that it's not really fully established in the Ultimate Comics to what extent, even after having his powers returned to him, that he relies on the suit, and to what extent the powers that he displays are actually just innate from within himself. So it's kind of like a combo deal. It's like he has powers, but he's also using the suit. Number 1. Beta Ray Bill. I love when I get to put Bill at number 1. You know, I just think he deserves it. Pretty crazy to think, but Beta Ray Bill was also once technically a Thor alternate. And the origin of him being Thor actually kind of goes all the way back pretty much to his own origin story in the comics. When passing near Earth with his people, the Corbinites, he was intercepted by S.H.I.E.L.D., who sent Thor to investigate. His ship, the Scuttlebutt, classified Thor as a threat, and so Beta Ray Bill went out to fight Thor. Surprisingly, Bill pretty easily won and even was able to claim Mjolnir, becoming himself Thor. Bill claimed he should get to keep the hammer as he won it fair and square in their fight. Odin ended up getting them to battle again to determine who should get to actually keep the hammer. And once more, actually, Bill won that fight. However, ultimately it was decided that Thor would get Mjolnir back and a new hammer instead, known as Stormbreaker, was made for Bill. That's about it for this one, my friends. Till next time, you stay nerdy, YouTube.